Welcome to this session of the Reference Desk, and today we're talking with Jonah Winters. It's May, the weekend of 7 and 8 in different parts of the world. Jonah's site, the Baha'i Library site, is one of the motivating influences on this series, because I've known Jonah for more than 3 decades and I know his work, and I've always admired his constancy with the project. He conceived it, he implemented it, and he stuck with it through who knows how many challenges behind the scenes. And researchers around the world benefit from his work, and not just researchers, but anybody who's got a query about some aspect of Baha'i history or Baha'i teachings, Baha'i community. There'll be something on Jonah's site. And after a number of decades, I started to wonder whether anybody had stopped to talk to Jonah about the project and hear what it's like to be a webmaster of a project that size. So it really was thinking of Jonah's project that greatly inspired this series. And so we're delighted that Jonah can be with us today, so we can ask him all those questions about what it's like to conceive and implement such an outstanding project, and hear the current circumstances of the project and the future of the project. So Jonah, welcome. Look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, Graham. I'm kind of new to Zoom, so if at any point my screen isn't showing properly or I'm muted and don't realize it, please just wave or something. This video series could not have come at a better time, both for my own work and for our mutual collaboration, bringing all of these diverse projects together with a future goal of combining our data sets. Now, the background behind me is different from our previous calls when I was in my room in Niagara Falls. Today, I'm at my dad's house in Oregon. And you might even see deer and wild turkeys in this field behind me. And I thought, what a wonderful place to have a backdrop for this conversation, until I stood up here this morning and I realized we've got a blower, a wood chipper, a lawnmower going, and occasionally rain on the roof. But those didn't seem to come further through the microphone, so I think it'll work fine. I prepared a long presentation, but I'm only going to talk about part of it. If I read through straight everything that I picked up to talk about today, it's only 20 minutes. If I read the whole thing, it'd be an hour and a half. But it's all online, and I'll show you where. So instead of me reading the entire thing, I anticipate this conversation being largely question, answer, and discussion. So please use the chat function for any questions that come to mind as I'm talking. And tomorrow I will reply to anything that we didn't get a chance to address in the chat. Also, sometimes I talk fast, so please interrupt me or pause me anytime. I'm using 2 laptops here, so forgive me if I don't make camera eye contact. Now I will turn on my screen share. Okay, here is my full presentation, which you can read later. Today, I'm just going to cover sections 1, 4, and 7. If the other topics come up, then I can address these then as well, but I want to keep this conversation streamlined. First, I'm going to demonstrate the quickest ways of finding the content on the site. Sections 2 and 3, which I will not read today. In here, I explain the background of the project, how and why I started it, and here, 4 necessary conditions that led to its success. At the bottom of this section, I estimate how many documents the library actually has. Section 3 is an updated version of my vision statement, which I first prepared for Graham's 2003 series. Next, I will talk about the unique place this website has in the online Baha'i ecosystem, and this will probably be the longest part of the talk. In sections 5 and 6, which you can read later if you like, first I talk about how this site works, how we create it, and the steps that go into running an online library. Casual users might notice that we post just 1 document per day on average, and they might think, that seems pretty easy. But in truth, posting new documents is at most a quarter of what we do. Next, I show some of our to-do list. I guess this list comprises 15,000 to 20,000 hours of work. I actually have lists of to-do lists. If I did this all myself, spending 3 hours a day and adding nothing more to these lists, I should finish by the end of my life. So my retirement time is already planned in advance. And finally, I'm going to talk about current and future changes. And this is where I anticipate fruitful discussions at the end of the session. Now I will go to the main page to get started. And first I'm going to talk about some quick usage tips. These tips might not be news to anyone on today's Zoom call who is already familiar with the library, but they could be helpful to new users who find this video on YouTube later. The library has about 14,000 documents, so easy navigation is important. I designed the site with two main principles. It is minimalist. I'm inspired by the google.com homepage. This site inspires me because this is one of the largest, most complicated web services on the internet, and it is hidden behind the most minimal, elegant simplicity. Inspired by that, my rule is not one extra letter and not one extra design element. The larger the site became over the years, the more I tried to simplify this interface. And if you look at the history of screenshots of the front page, you'll see that over the years, I would occasionally remove a single word from the front page, paring it down as much as I could. A second focus is keeping it as navigatable as possible. I tried to make every single document no more than 2 clicks away from the front page. Compare that with some websites where you find yourself drilling down through submenus trying to find your content. So all 14,000 documents, for the most part, are just 1 or 2 clicks away. Let's try unpublished articles. And here they all are, 1 click away. Now, the first way I've cataloged content to try to make it easy to find all these thousands of documents is by an arbitrary designation I call a collection. And that is what all of these links are. The collections sort documents either by media type, such as maps versus videos, or by provenance, such as documents from the Universal House of Justice versus National Spiritual Assemblies, or by subject, like introductory materials versus study guides. So like I say, this is a bit arbitrary, but it's convenient. Now, here along the top of the page, you'll see all of our search features. And the next thing new users might find helpful is the sitemap. The sitemap is identical to the content on the front page, but presented differently. It includes all of our different navigation options, and it includes all of the interface functions, like all these search boxes. One can also browse the library by clicking on What's New. We also have an RSS feed and featured pieces. You can also view any number of days simply by typing a number after new in the address bar. /new/50 will show us all the additions from the last couple months. One of the best ways to find content on the site is by tags. I'm going to scroll up to the first section. Tags function as a subject index. You can search the tags here, or you can type a keyword directly into the address bar, like before. /tags/test will match all parts of this keyword test, including the word greatest. And location shortcuts are the same, such as locations/Montreal. A subject index can be more helpful than a search engine for a couple reasons. One, it lists which items are about a topic versus merely mentioning a topic. Two, it solves the problem of alternate spellings and diacritics. For example, our tag Ishkabad covers 8 different variations or more that I've found so far, all the different spellings, no diacritics, with diacritics, in Cyrillic, etc. The library is only about 20% tagged so far. And here, let me recognize the work of Aryan Balhuis, who has spent hundreds of hours adding the tags that we do have. Tagging is such slow work because it requires a careful reading of the text. The complete list of all tags is here, sorted alphabetically or numerically, the same with all locations. And I have the chronology tags listed separately just because of limitations in my programming. As this subject index grows, it will become more helpful, and growing the subject index is one of our first things on our to-do list. For me, one of the fastest ways to find things on the website is just by typing keywords directly into the browser bar, the address bar. I don't even go through the main page. Like for today's presentation, I would just type /author/Winters. Sorry, my finger's a little cold. It's actually chilly out here. Or, whoops, I just accidentally moved my Zoom bar. Okay, so author Winters or title future. Or I could search for the year, listing everything in 22. Glenn Cameron's chronology, I'll go to it now, can also be searched by using these shortcuts. We can view year 1848 by typing /chronology/1848, or we could narrow it down to the month of March, or we could view just what happened on March 30th, just to see a single day. So those are the ways that I personally interact with the site. And I'm going to stop screen share for a moment to see if anyone has any questions or commentary so far. I don't know what screen I'm seeing. I'm only seeing a few thumbnails here. Like I said, I'm actually kind of new to Zoom. Did anyone raise their hand or anything?
Well, we're enjoying it so far, and
Okay,
look forward to. You can proceed, I think.
Good enough. I didn't want to run through it too quickly. So now that we've covered the basics of how to use it, I'll talk about why this website is both unique and valuable. I will go back to this page and let's go to this section. It is not just quantity, but quality. I noted that we have about 14,000 documents, but in my to-do list, you'll see that I personally have about 17,000 documents on my own computer waiting to be posted. And goodness knows how many Steve Cooney and Bill Collins and Graham Hassel and Don Calkins and everyone else has. Many, many documents. And I could have posted all of these documents online when I first received them, were it not for our focus on quality. I will not publish anything that hasn't been edited and formatted and with enough metadata. The vision statement right above explains that I never intended the library to be primarily for Baha'is or even a Baha'i site per se. I just wanted to archive historical and academic material. So the site is neutral, both in tone and content. It's not really intended to promote the faith or deepen the believers, but also it should have nothing that's offensive to Baha'i sensibilities. A second important aspect is the site's flexibility in hosting content. While a WordPress or a wiki suite can be customized to host anything, as for example, David Haslip has done with his Bahaipedia, the fact that our backend software is custom written just for this purpose and is on a dedicated server means we have basically no restrictions on content. For example, when the large BahaiLib.com website went offline, the library could absorb and repackage its content. And this URL will be static. So should Stephen Phelps or others wish to cite it, I will not change the addresses. Or when Stephen Collins needed to assemble a variety of media in one place for his History of the Baha'i Faith in North Carolina seminar, we could provide a single location with a static URL. Next, Here is a list of 6 features that lend the library its quality. I don't need to read these all now. You can read the section later if you want, but I'll summarize. The design is consistent across all pages and all indexes. The navigation is simple or even simplistic. And content is well tagged with metadata and cross-references. The library also helps facilitate collaboration and discussion. We run 6 email list servers for private academic use. We have a work group on Facebook, and we had one of the first bulletin board forums in 1997. For the young folks out there, forums are how people ask questions online before we had social media. We have also helped present Baha'i material in new media. In the early years, it was distributed on CD-ROM in Africa for those without internet access. Not my project, someone else took that on. At various times, I have shared archives on BitTorrent, and I kept a version of the library alive on Freenet for a few years. Others are also using the library to host their own projects. I'll highlight a few. Besides Glenn's Chronology, Adel Shafipur and his team of colleagues are working on the Iranian National Baha'i Archives collection. And they recently completed the Zuhur al-Haq manuscripts. We have a couple ongoing audio projects. One person is recording sacred writings in French. Someone else is preparing audio versions of letters from the Universal House of Justice. And we still have these 6 old projects online, such as Darius Shahrokh's Windows to the Past. Now, finally, we come to the section that motivates me the most to curate this library. I've been asked by a number of people over the years to post their unpublished life's work or archive the work of a parent. The first such collection was in 1999, when Barbara Sims and her family worked with me to post all of her books before she passed. The most recent was just last year, when Ernie Jones and a group of volunteers worked to scan, format, and proofread his late mother's collection of typed historical material. Before he had photocopiers, we had people like Emma Jones who typed and typed. Scholars have also asked me to preserve their unpublished writings when they were in their late years. For example, around 2013, Ahang Rabbani and Kamran Ekbal both sent me their remaining unpublished works shortly before their passing. Or, as Marlene Mack emailed me in 2020, when sending her life's collection of dramatic readings, she said, and gave permission to quote, "Looking for a home online that can be accessed by other Baha'is, it seems this website is the best venue for such a collection. I find myself anxious to find such a site because I've been diagnosed with a terminal illness and I wish to have my dramatic readings endure beyond my passing. So I feel that this gives me a certain degree of responsibility and motivation to continue keeping all this material online and alive." Now, before starting the last section I'm going to discuss today, let me turn off my screen share again just to see if there's any comments or questions, because I know I've already covered a fair bit. Nothing so far? Yes.
June Perkins has put a text in saying, "This is amazing." And I think that's a sentiment that everybody shares. But Jonah has invited any other comments or responses from those who are online.
This is Peter Cherry from the United States. And my only comment at this point is, I had no idea. There's so much more that you've been doing over these years than I knew about, and this is making it clear that Baha'i Library is really even more valuable than I thought.
Thanks, Peter. And Mujan, did you have a comment?
Yes, I had a question. When you were demonstrating, you said, for example, for a date, you put /date and then you put 1870 in or something. Would you get the same information if you put 1870 into the search box?
Oh, yes, of course. Typing the keywords directly into the address bar is simply a shortcut. I'm sure most people use the search functions, typing it directly to the search box.
But I was just wondering whether the putting it into the address bar is slightly more sophisticated in that you, by putting in dates and then / say 1870, you're only getting dates of 1870 from the chronology, whereas if you just put into the search bar, you may get books published in 1870 and all sorts of other stuff from 1870. Am I thinking right or what?
I was actually wondering if someone would bring this up. The chronology was added a few years after I programmed version 4, and I kind of tacked it on. Ideally, I would have rewritten the code to incorporate it in the same database, but I made a completely separate database for it, and that's why it has a different interface. So this is a bit confusing, and this will be addressed in the future. Most dates in the main catalog just have a year, like 2022. So if you type baha'ilibrary.com/date/2022, you'll get items from the main catalog and only by the year. Glenn's chronology uses months and days as well as years. For that, you would type baha'ilibrary.com/chronology/2022. And that's when you can append the month or the day. And if you just simply click on the chronology link, then you'll see the search box, which for most people is easier to use. I was only intending to show the shortcuts that I use.
Sorry, I'm still not quite clear. So just using the search box that's at the top of the page, how can you focus that search box on the chronology rather than all the other stuff that you've got on the website if you're not using the address bar?
Yes, there are two different search boxes. If you look at the navigation links at the top of any page, one of them says date search and one says chronology. And those are separate pages and they have separate search boxes.
Oh.
And if you click on them, you'll see that the date search box indicates why. It shows just enter the year. If you click on the chronology search box, it gives examples showing how you can narrow it down to month and or day. And I do recognize this is confusing and it's on our list to fix. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Now, maybe just one more technical question or suggestion from Steve Cooney before we ask Jonah to proceed. So Steve, did you want to ask that question?
The question about push notifications.
That's right.
Yeah, well, I mean, for a lot of people, it probably would become annoying, but for me, it would be very helpful to just get, as they occur, push notifications of new postings of material to the library. Because essentially, what I do, I just go straight to the history tab, basically, or what do you call the tab? The view that allows me to see back 90 days, a year or whatever, and look at the content that's been posted. So if that could be pushed to me, that would be a fantastic enhancement. And I guess you can opt into it, so you can opt out as well. But that would be very handy. That means that I can kind of stay in sync with new material and not sort of remember in a year's time to go back and have a look. And sometimes, you know, you're looking through 100 items, it's easier to do it one at a time as they occur. You can kind of evaluate and review whether it's something of interest. So that's just a tip or a suggestion. Yeah.
If I'm understanding your point correctly, there are RSS apps you can get that will send you a push notification. I tried one and just to test it, and I received an email anytime anything new appeared in the RSS new feed.
Yeah, so that service is monitoring your RSS feed and sending the alerts to me. Yeah. Does it
Yes.
tag it? Does it send advertising, or how does it pay for itself?
I'm sorry. There's actually a blower behind me, which I know you can't hear through the microphone.
No, sorry. I'm just wondering how they support themselves. Do they attach advertising, or?
Oh,
What
the
are
RS push notification apps?
Yeah,
I don't know. There's so many and I don't use any
Yeah.
of them.
yeah. Anyway, that's fine. I could do the same. I could poll it myself. So.
Well, Jonah, thanks for answering those questions. And if you've got more presentation to for us, go ahead.
Yes, I have the third section, which I expect will fill possibly the majority of our discussion. Now, like I said, I did prepare a long presentation because I wanted to summarize the last 25 years and also the next 25 years. And there's a fair bit to say, but I think it would just be boring if I had something read it all when people can read it online. So that's why I just distilled it to the three most important sections. And then if at the end of the call we have extra time, I can read some of those if we need a time filler. So yes, if we're ready, I can go on to my last section for today. I will share my screen. The last section is this one, the future and ownership. So the library is in desperate need of a complete reprogramming, and it has been for 10 years. It needs a new back-end structure. It needs a new front end for both desktop and mobile interfaces. We can't take advantage of true crowdsourcing, like inviting the public to add tags, until the code is open sourced, like on GitHub. Open sourcing the code will facilitate both security and evolution, because then we can tap into a worldwide community of developers. Right now, my code is nowhere near mature or secure enough to share online. I tried to fund and crowdsource the library a couple times before, first in 1999, and then a couple years later with the Web 2.0 system. We had a donations page, a sponsored projects page, and a fairly complicated, elaborate cohort of managing editors page with detailed instructions and style sheets. But in the end, we got no donations and only a couple more volunteers. So by 2005, I simply disbanded that system. It's time to try again, and this time we're making it work. And that is version 5. I will show this page, and then I will turn off my screen share. Last year, we started initial discussions on version 5, and some programming began later that year, but that effort seems to have evaporated. So now we need a fresh start with a new team. It will be a complex process involving many people, and we have no time estimate, but I hope to have a whole new site online within a couple years. I will stop my screen share and talk the rest. Now, I personally don't have the skill or the time to do this. Creating version 2, the dynamic database upgrade from 2003, was time-consuming but technically simple. I was able to learn enough after taking a 6-month course in internet technologies. The setup was simple too, just a single server with a standard LAMP implementation. LAMP stands for Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP, and that's still the current architecture. But things are different now. The languages have become vastly more complex. I learned PHP 3, and they're now up to 7. And to be honest, my aging brain doesn't even have the capacity to learn PHP 7 now, even if I had a few years to master it. As well, we probably need to move from a dedicated server to a distributed cloud hosting system like David has for his sites. Plus, we'll need database abstraction if we're going to be integrating multiple data sets. And we'll need an API. Most pressing, we need a mobile version because the site is impossible to read on a cell phone. This will require many more skills than the basic tech I learned years ago. It will require a team of experts, if not 2 or 3 teams. None of this will be possible with free labor, no matter how earnest the volunteers. So next, we plan to register a nonprofit with a dedicated bank account so that donations can be collected and then paid out to individuals and teams we hire for specific jobs, from programming to design to adding metadata. I set up an account in the States last year, and we've just received our third donation this year, so funds are starting to come in. I also needed an informal council of advisors and a smaller board of directors to take collective ownership. With a project as large and complicated as version 5, I don't know what I don't know. So I needed experts in programming, library science, database architecture, mobile interfaces, citation export, nonprofit law, and I don't even know what else. This will also ensure that the library not be under any one person's ownership or editorial control, and that donations not be spent without oversight. People who wish to support the project can know that funds could not be used for personal gain, and that no individual agenda is being promoted. We now have a council of 11 people who have agreed to take an advisory role, and we have a subset of 3 people which forms the board. These 11 advisors have a vote on board members, ownership, and the library's mandate. The 3-member board will oversee the day-to-day running of the site and expenditure of the donations. I will continue as managing editor only so long as elected. And that's where we're at. And I think that's the core of what I need to present today. If we need a time filler later, I can present more, but now I'd like to stop and open it up for whatever suggestions, questions, or discussions we have.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Jonah. And, so it's over to participants for any questions about the past, present, or future of the project.
I opened up the page. I was actually looking at your to-do list, which kind of goes into your future, what you're doing. Because it says that needs the metadata to each for exporting EndNote and BARC citations. What format are you use your metadata in now? What schema are you using?
We have no scheme for citations at the moment. By metadata for now, I just mean simple things like tags, dates, ISBNs, DOIs, OCLC numbers.
So you're not using controlled vocabularies to ensure retrievability.
Not at all. Now, in one of the sections I didn't read today.
Ouch.
Yes, section 2 is called Origin and Background. And there I explain how, when this started, I merely was posting my own grad papers because other people wanted them. And then more people started sharing their papers with me and said, please post my papers. I never intended to make a library. If I had, I would have structured it different from the very beginning. So it's grown organically with everything just being tacked on and then more tacked on, which is why we need a complete overhaul. And citation exports, Graham and I were talking about this, will be one of the crucial things the site needs. Now, I do not have any background in library science, but I have people I can ask for help when the time comes.
Good. I'm just kind of going like that, but you just explained to me why I can't go back and retrieve something I retrieved before off the site, is because the vocabulary is not controlled. And so I'll change my vocabulary, like I'll just stumble on something, because what I'll do is I'll just go down rabbit holes on your site and just, oh, this is cool. What's this? Oh, this is cool. But to actually search, sometimes I'll look for something with what should be the term. It's probably posted under another term, which is similar. And so because what you're using is the folksomies and not the controlled vocabularies.
Are you referring to what I mentioned as a subject index? I know what authority control is, but I don't know what you're referring
Yeah.
to.
It's the type of vocabularies so that you have a consistent, there's a consistent, so that's not only consistent with you, but it's consistent with the Library of Congress, and all other
Yes.
vocabulary, and the Gettys and with the House of, and yes, so it's time consuming. And when you said it was just you, I was like, oh, that's why.
I'll give you an example of how everything is hard-coded in the database, meaning it works but has no flexibility. Basically, I had a vision in my head when I took the Internet Technologies courses of how I wanted the site to work. And I took the necessary classes, the courses, to implement that. And I programmed it, procedural code, a series of if-then statements, essentially, to achieve the result I wanted. But that means that everything is hard-coded in the database. For example, my author system, I have 8 fields for authors: first and last name author 1, first and last name author 2, etc. for 4 authors. What do we do when you have 5 authors? I can't list them. What do we do when someone changes their last name? I can't list it. Maiden names? I can't list it. So this has been needing to be done since the very beginning. That requires a complete database overhaul, which I would do, which then requires I learn PHP 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, etc. My full-time job isn't in any of these fields. I'm a massage therapist. My background,
I love it.
And then I was a gardener, and then I was a property manager, and now I'm an RMT. But as I tell people, all those other jobs just pay the bills. This is what I do with my real time. But I've never taken classes in library science or database architecture, and I wouldn't have the time to reprogram it now anyway.
My thought was you need a junior youth group with those young pliable brains, and just put them on WC3 and say, hey, learn this.
Exactly. And once we have crowdsourcing and once we have open sourcing, then crowdsourcing can follow.
Yeah.
Right now, I can't really do true open sourcing because my code is not secure, because I'm no programming expert. So I don't really have the structure in place to get proper crowdsourcing. Rather, I've been paying individuals. For example, we have one person we hired to do abstracts, finish abstracts. We've got someone else we're hiring to fill in location tags. And I basically custom coded an interface just for that person. It works, but it's temporary.
A lot of patching. Yeah.
Yes. Kludges.
Have you thought of connect? I'm sorry, I need to be quiet.
No, go ahead.
No, Motion has had his hand up.
I'm happy for you to continue. No.
No, I was just seeing if he had thought of if there was any talk in taking this into one of the institutions, or if it's going to stay as a separate entity.
Yes, indeed. Good question. This has been a question asked since the beginning. In my 2003 vision statement for Graham's International Conference, I actually had a section on institutional involvement. And that's addressed in the Baha'i Library at 25 complete presentation section. Yes and no. On the one hand, there's real value for everyone, institutions and us, in keeping this completely separate from the institutions. We have the freedom to post critical content. Now, I don't mean theologically critical, covenant bending, shall we say. I mean, all those articles from the 1850s from Christian missionaries in Iran, this is very important historical material, but would an institution want to be posting some of these materials? Probably not. Second, of course, anything that the institutions are funding or directly controlling is going to have to be very, very well edited and precise and clean, 100% perfect. Our library only has to be 50% perfect. We do, of course, need to invite the institutions in a way to share their guidance. So before we proceed with actually registering a nonprofit, this call today is just the first step. We will be drafting a letter for a National Spiritual Assembly, probably the one in Canada, because that's where I reside, but we're not sure. CC to the Universal House of Justice, just to explain what we're doing and invite their guidance. But I don't feel that I could ask the institutions to take it over for a few reasons. One, we might lose a lot of our content, and two, the institutions might want to keep an arm's length away from it. So for now, we have a couple back channel contacts with the institutions and the Baha'i Internet Agency, so that if institutions have any concerns, they can contact us through that. And I have occasionally received letters from National Spiritual Assemblies when they had a concern about something on the website. But also, now that we have an advisory board, it is quite possible this board has the control to select the board. This council has the right to select the board members. It is out of my hands now. For all I know, they might say, let's vote out all these independent type scholars and bring in just institutional administration members. Probably that won't happen, but if they do, I accept it. We'll find out in a couple of years how this progresses.
Mujan, you had a question.
Yes, there's two interrelated questions. I was wondering whether you actually have a policy as to what content you actually put up on the site. In other words, is there anything that you'd reject? You know, do you actually have a defined area of things that you accept and put up? And interrelated with that is, I may have got this wrong, but I got the impression that what you were saying was that you were sort of moving towards handing over control to a sort of open, more open state of affairs where other people could put stuff up onto the website. Is that, did I get that right? Or because I was just wondering how you then do sort of control the content and not have undesirable stuff up there.
Two good questions, thank you. If you click on the link to my 2003 vision statement, the link is in the Baha'i Library 25 page at the top of the page. There I do have a section on the mandate where I explain how we choose stuff. And it's quite simple. Basically, I just want to post anything with academic or historical value that is not contraindicated in Baha'i practice. So obviously we can't publish, you know, the photographs or paintings of Baha'u'llah or covenant breaker materials. And also we want to observe academic principles. So we're not going to publish deepening materials. There's a bit of overlap between, say, a study guide and deepening materials, but it seems pretty clear in practice which things have academic value and which things don't. Historical value versus which things don't. Now, I have basically run it however I wanted this entire time, so all the choices have been mine. What do I want to post? That is no longer the case. Now that we actually have an advisory council and a board, they will have the right to write their own mandate, which of course we will vote on, or accept the mandate as I wrote it in 2003. So it might seem conceptually like it might be hard to determine what's historically or academically valuable versus what's not. But in practice, I've always found it very simple. So for example, I have not posted contemporary pilgrimage photography, but any older photographs, you know, prior to no set date, of course, I certainly would. I'm sorry, what was your second question?
So to what extent is it going to be possible for just anyone to put stuff up on there? Is it all going through a control still?
Yes. You see my big smile. In 2002, Wikipedia came on the scene. And this was right around the time that I just started taking my internet technology courses. And I thought, this is what we need. We need to Wikify the Baha'i Library. True crowdsourcing and open source, of course. And Brett Samir even tried implementing a Wikipedia version of the Baha'i Library, Baha'i9.com. We attempted to integrate them at one point. That might still happen in the future. And I, inspired by Wikipedia, I tried to make a system that would allow for, I had 4 levels of access to the website. I had super admin access, editor access, contributor access, and user access of all different levels, such as, for example, a contributor could upload anything they wanted, but they could only edit their own uploads. An editor could upload anything they wanted and edit anyone else's uploads, but neither of those people could delete or publish. A super admin could add new users, edit and delete and publish. And I actually was fairly proud of the system. And then sadly, we didn't have anyone participate. So my code was admittedly fairly primitive, and it's not a problem. I disbanded it in 2005, but yes, we did try that and it didn't work. Now, of course, this was at the very dawn of Web 2.0, which by definition is largely crowdsourced content. Wikipedia, of course, has fully matured in the last 20 years. And I would love to see something similar to that, again, with our system of multiple levels of approval, editorship, and access. We'll find out how we can incorporate this in the next version. This also brings up the aspect of version control and previous histories. My site, as it currently stands, keeps one simple snapshot of 24 hours before, but I don't have any type of edit history. We will need that later. So yes, what I would envision, and frankly, this has to happen, is like Baha'i Media has, we need to open this up to the entire world such that anyone can upload anything they want with a system in place to then vet what's uploaded before it appears on the actual website.
Well, there's a very good question with a very good answer, and some profound issues of curation and participation. So thanks, Mujan, for that question. Now, Adib, you've had a couple of comments that you put in the text, and we've got some other librarians online, a couple of IT people online, so maybe some other perspectives on the conversation so far. And Jonah, my own feeling about the degree of participation by others in the Baha'i Library is that users have been quite satisfied with the progress of the library and its content, and have, in a sense, maybe taken it for granted, but in a sense of admiring what you've got there. So, you know, I don't know whether the nature of the library needs to change in future. It's a curated set, and there are other technologies online that allow for more crowdsourced material. And I think there's room for these different types of projects to flower, because they end up bringing out a diverse range of content. And I think there's room for exactly what you've been doing, but with the meeting the technological challenges, the financial challenges, the managerial challenges, but the basic platform and the concept it continues to be a sound one.
Your comment reminds me of something someone brought up recently. They were saying, what if we were to turn this over to the advisory council and the institutions should want to take it over, or change the mandate? And what if we were to lose a portion of our content, such as, you know, these critical items posted or written by Christian missionaries? Well, if that were to happen, we could always fork the project. I could always make a smaller separate website, not very frequently maintained, of just the material that did not remain in the main library. I could call it the unofficial Baha'i Library. I'm fairly confident that institutions do not object to anything that's online so far, because the interactions I have had lead me to believe that if there were any problems, I would have heard it by now. So I feel fairly confident in saying we can keep online everything that I currently have online. That's not to say that everything I currently have online will remain in the future Baha'i Library, because I am no longer in control of the mandate. And that's as it should be. I'm just an individual, and I'm getting older and dumber by every day.
I think you just have to be really clear about the purpose of the site. What's its core vision? Is it storage on behalf of other people, of other people's stuff, or are you trying to, because you've got material there which is unpublished or is novel or is not found anywhere else? Is that what makes you distinctive? Is it a master index of everything? I mean, I think it's just being really cutting to the core of what is the purpose of the site. Is it a way to, I think almost all of your materials, you store it, right? You don't have any sort of virtual links. You cache everything, so you store everything as a file, an object, so to speak. So it's kind of an archive as well. I think just more thinking about your mission statement, your vision, what your collection policy is, and being really explicit about it, and then going down the crowdsourcing route for your application and also for your content is definitely a good strategy. But I think there's a lot of software components that you can reuse and assemble into a kind of distributed, or in today's terms, kind of microservice environment that you could build out without writing too much of your own code. Rely upon open source because there's even big businesses doing that now. So I think you're kind of on the right track. It's just a daunting task of all that material. And I think the other thing too is your backlog, how to get your backlog down, because you've got quite a lot of material that's not posted, that needs sorting or formatting or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of growing over time. You're posting the stuff that you get that's totally formatted, someone's nice PDF. But it sounds like you do have quite a lot of stuff that's just digitized or needs OCR or needs some kind of structure to it. I'm not sure, but you almost need a strategy for your backlog of material as well. Because if it's not if it's not accessible, then your value proposition is diminished. You're sort of holding back value and sort of not releasing that value. So if we can think about ways to get your backlog down, maybe crowdsourcing that as well, just sharing it a bit more visibly with people. Yeah, if you could make it easier or less opaque how to add material, or as you say, have a curation layer, submission layer, and a curation acceptance, validation control layer in your system would be great.
Thank you. I absolutely agree. In 1998, a year after I started it, at that point, I had so much material, I knew I was already far behind. So I made a folder called bin, baha'ilibrary.org, it was at the time, /bin, where I just dumped everything I received. So it was available for the public. But then more material started appearing in there, which maybe really shouldn't have been online or maybe need to be vetted. So I took that offline. Now, my entire backlog is actually online. It's in one directory above public HTML. So it's only accessible by FTP. But I am happy to share that entire archive with anyone via FTP. And one of my goals this year actually is to go through that backlog, take out anything that cannot be made public by copyright, or maybe it has unwise content in it, and put it back in a folder called bin, publicly accessible, so people can see what's there. And then we'll probably find volunteers who will say, hey, I want to proofread this document, or I'll format that one. So yes, thank you so much, Steve. That definitely needs to happen and will this year.
Sure, no pressure. What you do is amazing. I just know the hours that you either coordinating or doing yourself. It's yeah, I just know what's involved. It's quite incredible. And in your constancy and your perseverance with it is what has made it survive, right? It's reliable, trustworthy, always there, always up. Your uptime is good. So yeah, no, I just think you can improve it, but just do it in an evolutionary kind of sense. Don't try and do it all at once.
Yep. On a tangent, I just realized I should mention something. Anyone who's on this call today, obviously everyone here is by invitation only, so we already have the best and the brightest, many of them, in our archivist and librarian community. So if there's anyone on today's call who would like to be a member of the advisory council, or if anyone suggests any name that we should add to the advisory council, please let me know and I'll bring it to the council for a vote. The 11 names we currently have are people I specifically invited for specific reasons. I knew I needed a couple people to help me on library science and database architecture and EndNote exporting. So I reached out to about 16 people and I said, I need your help in this area. Will you be on an advisory council? Now, because I reached out to them, that's also why I'm not publishing their names. I'd be delighted if anyone wants to disclose that they're part of the project, but they don't need to. This is just for our own personal, our own private help. Later, we will, when we have a more formal structure and an actual nonprofit, then at that time we might have a list of names we publish of an actual board. So I'm going to repeat, if anyone wants to be part of the council or suggest a name, please let me know and we'll present it to the board.
June.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to, there was a couple of things. I'm not sure if this is helpful or not. I don't have a library background either. But I really found the thing of people who were giving you papers that they wanted retained, quite moving, that they thought their papers may be of use to people in the future and they needed somewhere for them to be stored, like the archival aspect, and having been looking for archives for stuff to do with my own research project and what would happen if something happened to me tomorrow, where would be a good place to store stuff and who would continue work there. I suppose they're things that keep us all up because it's like you're creating a legacy of things that may be really useful to people in the future that we can't even see now for doing that sort of work. And I think that that's a really vital and important thing, to have places where things can be stored. And another reflection is just this, the capacity of individuals to create initiatives and our growing understanding of what social action actually means in practice, which is that relationship between individuals, the institutions, is something that we're all working towards, really having that capacity to have sustainable projects in the wider community as well. So I think that those things you've raised that we're grappling with on any of our projects is very important. And I think that you've been very courageous at times and worked through a lot of the challenges. So just sharing that process and the magnitude of what you're doing is incredible. But yeah, I find that at the grassroots, a lot of people aren't taking care of papers or materials. Things are constantly being lost that would be helpful to and useful to researchers. I even come across stuff. So I just think, yeah, there must be a way to communicate and get the support that's needed. But one thing that I wanted to raise too is that I wonder if on your board, whether having people with some intercultural sensitivity to different levels to do with retaining of Indigenous materials, because there can be additional factors to go with those areas. So I just thought that might be an area I wasn't sure had been thought about. We have a lot of protocols on Australia on where and how things are stored and permissions and all sorts of things that we work through at a wider community level. So I don't know if that was a helpful thing to raise with you as well.
I will admit, I looked at our list of council members a couple months ago, and I blushed, realizing they were almost all Caucasian males. That cannot stand. I will get more suggestions, and yes, I completely agree with you. Regarding your first comment, I will say I cried when Ahang Rabani, who I had known somewhat personally for a time, emailed me, tearing up right now, and he said, you know, he was in the hospital, I believe. He said he was on bed. I believe he was actually quite sick when he emailed me and said, you know, will you save my papers? I cried.
Yeah, so I think that's probably one of the functions that, in the absence of national level archive repositories, because they're few and far between, certainly I'm not aware of any that it will even, you know, expose in their catalogs at this point. I guess you're potentially a de facto store until such time as the maturity and capability evolves. So that is potentially, I don't know, a version of things that you could encourage. So you specialize in storing that material where it can't be stored in case it gets lost, but that might not be the main business. It could be a different product, so to speak. So I think, yeah, I just think you just need to talk more and think it through and whiteboard it, and you get some feedback and bounce ideas off people. Yeah, just we're all there ready to help, Jonah. There's no right answer. It's just there's too many things to do and too little time. But I think that is possibly number one value, is where you are retaining material that is not found elsewhere.
Thank you, I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you all. I think we're coming to our final questions and comments for today.
I have not yet looked at the chat, but I will look at this later. I know we've gotten a few, and I've had some comments and suggestions in here. Thank you to everyone who has sent comments in the chat. I will save this and address them later.
Cool. And I know that you've tried to start a conversation with a couple of us and probably haven't responded because you've looked at a June timeframe, but is that still something you want to do, Jonah?
I'm sorry, which?
You've sent out some comments after my session in early April, which I haven't really responded to.
Oh, yes.
Is that still, you want to, around June, you want to get started on in earnest on your conversations?
I said June because I knew that after today, I need to take a break from thinking about this for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, sure.
But yes, you obviously have, to my knowledge, the largest such database with your EndNote database. Obviously, Bill Collins' bibliography, we'd love to incorporate that somehow. Stephen Phelps' inventory. And these are all completely separate projects with disparate data sets. I don't even know, since I'm no database architecture expert, how do we even bring relationality to these databases? What's the difference between an API versus an abstraction layer? Hopefully we'll have some experts who can help us figure out how to do this.
Yeah, well, that's good. I will encourage you to just keep going with it. So when you're ready, we're ready. So
David, please.
Jonah, of course, I want to echo this is amazing work and even more complex than I had known previously. A lot of the material that I run across is copyright protected, and I'm wondering if you have thought of eventually going the way of archive.org, of allowing temporary access to copyright protected material through a checkout system, or if you're, is that on the radar, or how do you handle, things you might want to share but are copyright protected?
This is something else I would have done different from the beginning if I had a future looking glass. When we started the site, Creative Commons wasn't even a term. So I just made my own impromptu copyright system. Like if there was an item that that I knew no one was going to object to, but was still, I didn't sell formal copyright. I might call it fair use. Was it technically fair use? I'm not sure. Now, of course, we have all these different CC designations. So we do have to go through every single item and re-tag it with a new copyright status based on the systems that did not exist when I started this. And obviously, if the institutions were to have a more direct involvement, then we would have to be even more precise about getting explicit written copyright. Sometimes my approach has been, you know, forgiveness later versus permission now. And with the people have the understanding that anytime I get any request to remove anything, as long as it's a reasonable request, I remove it immediately. And by reasonable, I mean not just an author, but a relative of an author or a descendant of an author. I've removed things which I honestly probably didn't need to remove, such as some pilgrim's notes, which the children of the pilgrim asked me to remove. But I want to make sure that everyone sees that we are trying to, as Google says, do no evil. So yes, copyright designations will need to be refined and upgraded.
Thanks very much for that, David. And one last question or comment. Jeff, did you have something? Sonia, do you have something? Go ahead.
I actually just wanted to mention another world that often gets forgotten about in academia, and it's the arts. And I'm very, very grateful to Jonah for hosting the Baha'i Association for the Arts website, which is used all the time, all over the world, also by academics who are not Baha'is. And it's not just the academics and the researchers, but it's just even people who just like looking at a nice picture or listening to a song. And one of the things that your library has done is shown diversity and inclusion to the arts world, because I really get contacted by a lot of people from very different backgrounds who assume from looking at the website and seeing it there and seeing the word Baha'i Library, oh, this is professional. This is treating the arts as if they're valid. Or this is not having a hierarchy of putting things into categories. Anyway, just a word of thanks, and I'm very grateful for that and very happy to be part and to keep it there as long as it may stay. Thank you.
Thank you. We added, it's growing. We added a poetry collection about 10 years ago, and just 2 years ago, when Marlene Mack sent me her stuff, we added a new scripts collection. So yes, bit by bit, we'll certainly be incorporating the arts. Now, how does that fit in with the mandate of academic and historical application? I don't know. Not my job to worry about that. I would love to include more arts. Thank you.
Well, Jonah, thanks very much for this presentation today. Everybody's learned so much more about Baha'i Library, about the challenges in the past and the challenges in the future. So we're very grateful to you for this presentation. And we look forward to maybe having another session in the future to see how all of this consultation brings it together and assists with forward progress. So thanks very much for your time today.
In another 20 years, we'll do this again. Thank you, Graham.